In the 9th century, the papacy already sat at the center of a dangerous game. Popes did not simply lead prayers, they influenced kings, controlled appointments, and represented a prize worth fighting over. That meant elections turned brutal, alliances shifted fast, and rivals worked constantly to undermine whoever sat on the throne of Rome. In that kind of world, stability mattered less than survival. And every crisis created openings for stories that explained, blamed, or justified what people saw. This was also a strictly male system. Church offices, education, and the authority to speak publicly in religion all stayed in men's hands by custom and by law, so any tale about a woman crossing that boundary sounded shocking on purpose. It challenged the rules people assumed were unbreakable. But the same rules also hid women from the written record, because they rarely appeared in official lists or clerical biographies. That silence left gaps, and gaps invited invention. The problem was that the records themselves did not always settle arguments. Names repeated, dates conflicted, and political enemies rewrote reputations after the fact. Rumour moved faster than documentation, especially when travellers, monks, and local clergy carried news from city to city. Over time, a whispered claim could harden into a remembered fact, simply because it fit the chaos people already believed about Rome. This was the setting where an impossible story had room to grow. Into that unstable world, the legend introduced someone no one expected. A young woman, unusually bright, restless, and painfully aware of the limits placed on her. The rules of her time treated advanced learning as a male space, guarded by custom as much as law. So the story gave her a choice with consequences. She either stayed visible and stayed confined, or she changed how the world saw her. According to the tale, she took the risk. She cut ties with the life assigned to her and built a new one by passing as a man. That decision did not simply change clothes or a name, it changed access. As a male student, doors opened that had been closed without question. Lessons, books, travel, ambition, suddenly these became possible, but only if the disguise held. And the disguise demanded discipline every day. A slip could have meant humiliation, punishment, even death, depending on who felt threatened. Yet the legend insisted she managed it because she learned fast and stayed careful. In this version of events, intelligence became her cover story, and success became her protection. The more she proved herself in study, the more her new identity seemed natural to others. Under her new male identity, she stopped living like someone in hiding and started living like someone on a path. She moved from place to place, following schools, libraries, and teachers the way ambitious young clerics did. Each stop gave her something practical: sharper Latin, quicker arguments, and the habit of sounding certain. In a world where education opened doors, that mattered more than where she came from. The travel also solved a problem her disguise created. If no one knew her past too well, no one checked it too closely. New towns meant new first impressions, and she offered the one people trusted most, a learned man with discipline. She took part in debates, copied texts, and kept rising in skill. Word spread in the only way it needed to. People repeated her name with respect. By the time the legend carried her toward the church, she no longer sounded like an imposter. She sounded trained. That reputation became the story's key tool because it made the next steps feel plausible to listeners. If this figure had been merely a traveller, the tale ended there. Instead, the legend built her into a scholar people deferred to. And in the medieval church, deference became opportunity. The scholar did not stay on the road forever. Under her male name, she entered church service because that was where learning opened doors and paid for itself. She took on the duties expected of any young cleric and kept her past sealed off. Each step demanded routine proof: reading, writing, judgment, and discipline. She provided it again and again. The disguise stopped being a stunt. It became a career. Promotion followed the logic of the institution. Superiors relied on people who delivered work and caused no trouble, and this new cleric seemed to do both. She moved from helper to trusted administrator, then into roles where she advised others, handled disputes, and managed church business. The more responsibilities she carried, the more people assumed she belonged there. That assumption mattered. In the church, credibility often grew faster than truth. With every advancement, the risk changed shape. Early on, a mistake might have exposed her. Later, success itself drew attention. She now stood in public life, in a system that measured status through rank and reputation. The legend used this climb to shift the story's weight. It stopped being only about one person escaping limits. It became about how an entire hierarchy could lift someone upward without ever seeing who they were. In the legend, the rise finally reached the moment that mattered. A pope died, and the church needed a replacement fast enough to keep Rome steady. The candidate who stood out carried no famous family name, no army, no fortune. The strength came from reputation alone. The disguised cleric looked like a safe choice, educated, disciplined, and already trusted inside the system. The election happened, and the story crossed its point of no return. The new pope took the name John, a name that sounded ordinary and believable, and that normality helped the mask hold. Officials accepted him, clergy obeyed him, and people treated him as the next link in a long chain. Once the title settled, everyday routine did the rest. Authority started producing its own proof. From there, the legend claimed Rome lived under a secret it did not suspect. Decisions carried papal weight because they came from the papal office, not because anyone questioned the person beneath it. The disguised woman controlled ceremonies, appointments, and judgments as John, and each public act deepened the illusion. The risk stayed constant, though. One slip could have turned reverence into violence instantly. For a while, the legend said the new pope ruled well. Decisions got made, disputes got handled, and nothing in public seemed out of place. That normal success mattered because it lowered suspicion. People trusted what they saw working, and the more routine the reign became, the safer the secret seemed. Then the story introduced a problem that did not care about politics or discipline. A pregnancy, still hidden, started to advance on its own schedule. In the logic of the tale, this changed everything. A disguise could be managed day to day, but a pregnancy created deadlines. Each week increased the risk that a small mistake became an obvious truth. The legend leaned on practical pressures, public appearances, religious ceremonies, and constant contact with attendants who watched closely. The Pope could not simply disappear without questions. Even choices meant to protect the secret could have signaled that something was wrong. So the reign kept moving forward, but it moved under a clock. The story suggested that every successful moment also tightened the trap, because the Pope had to remain visible while the body changed, and the higher the office, the less room there was for private life. The legend used that tension to pull the audience toward an inevitable exposure. In the background, an ordinary human event turned into a threat to an entire institution. The legend's pressure point finally hit in the most public way possible. During a formal procession, with clergy and ordinary Romans close behind, the hidden pregnancy stopped being a private danger and became an immediate crisis. Pain took over. Her pace broke. The ritual order of the event cracked in real time, and in that instant, the story's biggest secret moved from rumor to something people believed they saw with their own eyes. What happened next defined the tale. The Pope everyone followed as a man went into labour in the street. There was no careful exit, no controlled message, no time to invent an explanation. The body gave the truth away faster than any witness could deny it. Confusion spread first, then certainty. People who had treated her authority as unquestionable suddenly had to process a simpler, harder fact. They believed they had been fooled. The crowd's shock turned into something more dangerous. Anger and panic aimed at the person at the centre and at the institution that had elevated her. In the legend, the delivery did not just reveal a pregnancy. It collapsed the entire disguise in seconds. A reign that had depended on never being tested by biology now faced the one test it could not pass quietly. From that point, the story no longer asked if it was possible. It demanded a punishment. After the birth exposed the secret, the legend shifted fast from surprise to punishment. It claimed the crowd turned on the Pope they had trusted, and the moment that had looked like divine order suddenly looked like a huge fraud. In some versions, she died there and then. In others, she survived only long enough to be removed. Either way, the message stayed the same. The deception did not end quietly. Then came the disgrace. The story insisted that her name could not remain on the list of popes because that would mean admitting the church had been fooled at the highest level. So the legend gave Rome a repair job. Officials hurried to replace her. Supporters vanished and witnesses learned to stay silent. Responsibility got pushed away from the institution and onto one person. It turned a public catastrophe into a private scandal. And finally, the legend added the cleanup. It said the incident had to be erased, or at least explained, because the church's authority depended on looking unbroken and unquestionable. Some retellings claimed her memory was cut out of records. Others claimed a new rule appeared, meant to prevent a repeat. Whatever the detail, the warning stayed clear. Power demanded control of the story, and deception always carried a price. Centuries later, the tale did not fade, it hardened. In the High Middle Ages, more people read and copied books, and churchmen spoke to bigger crowds. That mattered because the Pope Joan story moved from rumour into writing. Chroniclers began to place her into lists of popes and timelines of Rome. Once it sat on a page like that, it looked official. Many readers treated it as settled fact. Preachers helped even more. They used the story in sermons because it delivered a clean warning. Hidden sin rose high, then collapsed in public. The point landed fast, and it stayed in memory. Each retelling made the legend easier to believe because the audience heard it from trusted voices. Soon, the story travelled with the rhythms of church life, repeated in different towns, translated into simpler language, and passed along as something everyone already knew. By the late Middle Ages, the story reached a new stage. Writers did not just repeat it, they treated it like an event that belonged in history. Some versions added details, dates and names that sounded precise, even when they were not. That gave the legend a false weight. Over time, Pope Joan became less a strange rumour and more a familiar chapter in the past, lodged in popular imagination and hard to dislodge. In the present day, Pope Joan no longer sat in the category of accepted history. Most historians treated her as a medieval legend built from retellings rather than firm proof. The reason sounded simple. When the papacy left records, it also left gaps, and the Joan story did not fit cleanly into what could be dated and checked. A dramatic tale survived, a verifiable pope did not. Modern researchers followed a different set of rules than medieval storytellers did. They compared lists of popes, checked timelines, weighed letters and official documents, and asked what sources actually existed at the time. Then they asked the harder question, when did the Joan story first appeared in writing, and how long after the supposed events? The later the first mention came, the weaker it looked. Evidence, not excitement, decided credibility. That contrast revealed the real lesson of the legend. In the medieval world, a striking rumour could travel fast, settled into sermons and chronicles, and hardened into something people repeated as fact. Over centuries, repetition created authority. But modern history worked backward, stripping away later claims until only the earliest supports remained. With Pope Joan, that process left a cultural force, not a confirmed pontiff. The story endured because it answered fears, not because it proved itself.